7 signs many seniors show in their last year of life. What seniors' families need to know. When 78-year-old Catherine started giving away her jewellery to her grandchildren, her daughter thought she was just being generous. 3 months later, Catherine was gone. The signs were there all along, but no one recognized them. If your aging parent has suddenly started talking about the good old days more than usual, stopped caring about their favorite hobbies, or seems to be saying goodbye in small ways, you need to hear this. According to hospice professionals, there are 7 distinct changes that appear in a senior's final year. Changes so subtle that families miss them until it's too late. Some happen 6 months before, others just weeks. Today, I'm sharing what doctors and caregivers wish every family knew, so you don't look back with regret, wondering if you missed your chance to truly be there. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 7 specific signs that medical professionals and experienced caregivers have documented in seniors during their final year. You'll learn exactly what changes in sleep patterns really mean, why sudden generosity isn't just kindness, and what it means when your parent stops complaining about things that used to bother them. I'll show you the physical indicators that appear months before families expect, the emotional shifts that signal deep internal awareness, and the communication patterns that most people completely misinterpret. But here's what matters most. Sign number 7 is something 90% of families never notice until after their loved one passes. Yet it's the clearest indicator of all. Recognizing these patterns early gives you something priceless. Time. Time to have those conversations, create final memories, and ensure your loved one feels heard and loved. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to watch for, and, more importantly, how to respond with grace and presence instead of panic. Here's something most people don't realize. According to palliative care research, nearly 70% of seniors are aware they're approaching the end long before their families acknowledge it. They're sending signals, trying to communicate their needs, but loved ones often misread these messages as confusion or depression. Understanding these 7 signs isn't about dwelling on death. It's about honoring life. When you recognize what's happening, you can shift from denial to presence. You can ask the questions that matter, record the stories that would otherwise be lost, and fulfill wishes while there's still time. Families who identify these patterns early report significantly less guilt and regret afterward because they use their remaining time intentionally. They stopped pushing doctor appointments that felt invasive and started prioritizing comfort. They had the estate conversations, the forgiveness talks, and the thank you for everything moments. Perhaps most critically, they learned to sit quietly and just listen when their loved one needed to reminisce. The pain of loss doesn't disappear, but the torture of what if and if only can be avoided entirely when you know what you're looking at. The first sign often appears so gradually that families rationalize it away. Your loved ones start sleeping significantly more during the day, yet they're awake at odd hours of the night. We're not talking about occasional naps. This is sleeping 14, 16, sometimes 18 hours a day. Their body is beginning a natural conservation process, redirecting energy away from activity and toward essential functions. Why does this happen? As the body's systems slowly decline, cellular energy production decreases. The organs are working harder to maintain basic functions, which requires more rest. Additionally, the brain's circadian rhythm, our internal clock, begins to dysfunction, erasing the boundary between day and night. When 82-year-old Vernon started dozing off every afternoon, his son assumed it was boredom or perhaps a medication side effect. But within weeks, Vernon was sleeping through breakfast, waking only for lunch, then returning to bed by 3 o'clock. His son felt frustrated, thinking his father was giving up on life. Only later did he understand that Vernon's body was naturally preparing, conserving strength for the time he had left. Instead of fighting the sleep, they adjusted. The son started visiting during Vernon's alert midday window, making those 2 hours count rather than resenting the 22 hours of rest. Here's what you should watch for: sudden increases in daily sleep that persist for weeks, difficulty staying awake during previously active times, or your loved one seeming unusually tired despite adequate rest. This isn't laziness or depression, it's physiological. Sign number 2 catches families off guard because it looks like peace, but it's actually something deeper. Your loved one starts pulling away from friendships, clubs, and activities they once enjoyed. They decline invitations to church gatherings, skip the weekly card games, and stop calling their longtime friends. This is different from normal aging. Typical older adults might slow down physically but still crave social connection. They'll attend events even if they need help getting there. What we're talking about here is a conscious turning inward. They're not isolated because of mobility issues or transportation problems. They're choosing solitude because they're beginning an internal process of life review and emotional preparation. Psychologists call this social narrowing. Your loved one is instinctively focusing their limited energy on only the most essential relationships, usually immediate family. Maintaining casual friendships suddenly feels exhausting and unnecessary. They're prioritizing depth over breadth. When 75-year-old Sylvia stopped attending her book club after 15 years of perfect attendance, her daughter worried about depression. She tried convincing Sylvia to go, even offering to drive her. But Sylvia kept refusing, saying she'd rather stay home. What her daughter didn't realize was that Sylvia wasn't sad. She was settling. She wanted quiet time with her thoughts, not chatter about novels. Here's how to respond with compassion. Don't force social engagement. Instead, ask open-ended questions like, "What feels most comfortable for you right now?" Or, "Would you prefer just the 2 of us spending time together?" Respect their need for smaller, more intimate interactions. Bring one grandchild instead of the whole family. Sit together in silence if that's what they want. The third sign is one that deeply unsettles family members. Your loved one starts talking frequently about people who've already passed away, mentioning them as if they're still present or claiming to have seen them recently. A mother might casually mention that her deceased husband visited her last night, or a father insists his long-gone sister was sitting in the room yesterday. Most families immediately worry about dementia or hallucinations. They call the doctor, request medication adjustments, or try to correct their parent by saying, "No, Dad, Uncle Henry died 10 years ago." But what's actually happening is far more profound than confusion. Research in end-of-life psychology shows these experiences are remarkably common among dying individuals, even those with zero cognitive impairment. Neurologically, as the brain begins its natural decline, the barrier between memory and present perception becomes thinner. But there's also a spiritual and emotional component. Your loved one is reconnecting with their past, finding comfort in the presence of those who mattered most. They're mentally preparing for their own transition by spending time with those who've already made that journey. When 80-year-old Leonard started telling his grandson about conversations with his late wife, the family panicked and scheduled a neurological exam. The tests came back normal. Leonard wasn't losing his mind. He was finding peace. These visits, whether interpreted as brain chemistry or spiritual encounters, brought him tremendous comfort during his final months. Here's how to provide meaningful support. Don't argue with their reality. Instead of correcting them, ask gentle questions like, "What did she say to you?" or "How did it feel to see him again?" Let them share these experiences without judgment. These conversations often reveal what your loved one needs emotionally: reassurance, permission to let go, or confirmation that they'll be reunited with those they've lost. By validating rather than dismissing these moments, you give them space to process their approaching transition in whatever way brings them peace. Sign number 4 is perhaps the most distressing for families to witness. Your loved one stops eating. Not just eating less, they actively refuse favourite foods, push plates away after a few bites, or claim nothing tastes good anymore. Meals that once brought joy now feel like a burden. Family members instinctively panic. They try tempting their loved one with special dishes, resort to nutritional shakes, or beg them to just eat a little more. The refusal to eat feels like giving up, and caregivers often blame themselves for not finding the right food or cooking method. But here's the medical reality. As the body's systems begin shutting down, digestion becomes increasingly difficult and energy-intensive. The digestive tract slows dramatically, making food feel heavy and uncomfortable. Metabolic needs decrease substantially. A body at rest simply doesn't require the caloric intake of an active person. Additionally, taste buds change significantly, making previously delicious foods taste metallic, bland, or even unpleasant. Your loved one isn't being stubborn. Their body is genuinely rejecting nutrition it can no longer process efficiently. When 71-year-old Nadine stopped eating her beloved pasta dishes, her son spent weeks trying different recipes, assuming he just hadn't found the right one. He felt helpless watching her shrink. What he didn't understand was that forcing food was actually causing discomfort, not preventing decline. Here are practical tips for caregivers. Shift your focus from quantity to quality. Offer small portions of whatever they request, even if it's just ice cream or broth. Don't pressure them to finish plates. Keep offerings simple. Often bland, soft foods are easiest to tolerate. Popsicles, smoothies and soups may be more appealing than solid meals. Most importantly, recognize that at this stage, eating is about comfort and connection, not nutrition. Sit with them during mealtimes, regardless of whether they eat. The companionship matters more than the calories. Sign number 5 reveals itself through a distinct communication shift. Your loved one begins telling the same stories repeatedly, but not randomly. They fixate on particular moments from their past. They recount their wedding day for the 5th time this week, describe their childhood home in vivid detail, or relive a specific accomplishment over and over. Families often mistake this for memory loss, thinking, "Mom doesn't remember, she already told me this story." But this isn't forgetfulness, it's purposeful life review. Your loved one is mentally revisiting the moments that defined them, seeking to make sense of their journey and find meaning in their experiences. They're essentially curating their life's highlight reel, determining which chapters mattered most. Psychologically, this process serves a critical function. By repeatedly sharing these specific memories, seniors are attempting to pass down their legacy, ensuring these stories survive beyond them. They're also processing unresolved emotions attached to these events, celebrating triumphs, making peace with regrets, or finding closure on relationships that shaped them. When 77-year-old Samuel kept describing the day he started his small business in 1972, his children grew impatient, having heard it countless times. They'd interrupt with, "Yes, Dad, we know." What they missed was Samuel's deeper need. He wasn't just reminiscing, he was affirming that his life had purpose, that his hard work created the foundation for his family's success. Here's how families can create meaningful moments. Listen as if hearing the story for the first time. Ask new questions that let them expand on details. What were you feeling that day? Or who else was there with you? Record these conversations on your phone. The repetition isn't about your loved one forgetting they told you. It's about them needing to tell it again, because that memory holds essential meaning for them. These aren't just stories. They're your loved one's way of saying, "This is who I was. Remember me this way." Sign number 6 often appears suddenly and can feel alarming. Your loved one starts systematically giving away items they've treasured for decades. They hand you their mother's ring, insist a grandchild take their favourite chair, or distribute photo albums among family members. They're not cleaning out clutter, they're distributing pieces of themselves. This behaviour represents a profound psychological shift called legacy work. Your loved one is taking control of their story's final chapter by deciding who receives what. Each item carries specific meaning, and by personally choosing its next guardian, they're ensuring their values and memories continue through these objects. It's their way of saying, "I won't be here to explain why this mattered, so I'm telling you now." There's also a spiritual element at play. Many cultures recognize this as a person preparing for transition, lightening their earthly load, releasing attachments, and finding peace through generosity. They're creating tangible connections between past and future, bridging generations through objects that held significance in their life. When 73-year-old Lucille started giving her jewellery to her nieces and her books to neighbours, her son panicked, thinking she was depressed or planning something drastic. He tried returning the items, insisting she'd need them. But Lucille wasn't being morbid, she was being intentional. She wanted to see her treasures appreciated while she could still witness the joy they brought others. Here's why this is actually a gift. These moments offer irreplaceable opportunities for connection. When your loved one hands you something precious, sit down and ask about it. "Tell me about this watch. When did you get it? What does it mean to you?" Let them share the story behind each item. Accept these gifts graciously, even if they feel premature. Take photos of your loved one with each object before it's transferred. Most importantly, recognize that this isn't about the things themselves. It's about your loved one orchestrating their legacy, ensuring nothing important is left unsaid or unclaimed. Now we reach sign number 7, the one that 90% of families completely overlook because it disguises itself as something wonderful. Your loved one suddenly becomes peaceful. The person who spent decades holding grudges unexpectedly forgives. The parent who always criticized suddenly offers only praise. Arguments that defined relationships for years simply dissolve. This isn't personality change from medication or cognitive decline. This is something far more profound. Your loved one is actively releasing the weight they've carried, making peace with their life's unfinished business. They're forgiving people who wronged them not because those people deserve it, but because carrying that anger into their final days feels pointless. They're expressing love they previously withheld because time no longer permits emotional guardedness. Neurologically, as the brain approaches end of life, the amygdala, responsible for fear and anger responses, becomes less reactive. But beyond biology, there's a conscious choice happening. Your loved one is essentially asking themselves what actually matters, and discovering that old resentments, pride and stubbornness don't make the list. When 69-year-old Russell called his estranged brother after 15 years of silence, his daughter assumed he was lonely. When he apologized to his son for being too strict during his childhood, the son thought his father was being sentimental. Nobody recognized these actions for what they truly were. Russell tying up loose ends, seeking closure before it was too late. He passed 4 months later, leaving behind relationships that had been healed rather than broken. Here's why this sign is so critical. When you witness this unexpected peace, don't dismiss it as a good mood or a lucky day. Recognize it as your invitation. If your typically reserved parent suddenly says, "I love you," that's your moment to say it back, and mean it deeply. If they reach out to repair a damaged relationship, facilitate that connection immediately. These gestures aren't random, they're deliberate acts of completion. Your loved one is showing you that they're preparing to leave with a clear conscience, and they're giving you the gift of doing the same. If you're recognizing any of these signs in your loved one, here's what you can do starting today. First, initiate the conversation they've been waiting for. Ask directly. Is there anything you want to talk about? Anything you need to say or hear? Give them explicit permission to share their fears, wishes or goodbyes without you falling apart. Your strength allows their honesty. Second, document their voice and presence now. Record casual conversations on your phone, their laugh, their advice, even mundane chatter. Ask them to share wisdom for future grandchildren or great-grandchildren. These recordings become priceless. Write down their recipes in their own words, including the stories behind each dish. Third, prioritize their comfort over medical intervention. Ask what matters most to them right now. Is it pain management, staying home, or maintaining dignity? Sometimes the kindest thing isn't another treatment, but simply being present. Discuss advance directives clearly so you can honor their wishes without guessing. Fourth, address unfinished business immediately. If they mention someone they haven't spoken to, help arrange that contact. If they express regret about something undone, find ways to resolve it together. Don't assume there's more time. Create opportunities for closure while they still have the energy and clarity to participate fully in these meaningful moments. Here's the truth that nobody wants to face, but everyone needs to hear. Recognizing these 7 signs doesn't mean giving up on your loved one. It means showing up for them completely. It means shifting from fixing to being present, from denying to honoring, from fear to love. Your parent or grandparent isn't asking you to save them from the inevitable. They're asking you to walk beside them through it. When you notice these signs and respond with awareness instead of panic, you're giving them something irreplaceable, the freedom to transition with dignity, surrounded by people who understand what's happening and love them anyway. The families who carry the least regret aren't those who fought hardest against these signs. They're the ones who recognize them early and use that knowledge to create profound final chapters. They asked the hard questions. They listened to the repeated stories with fresh patience. They sat in comfortable silence. They said, "I love you," and "thank you," while those words could still be heard and absorbed. These signs aren't tragedies to prevent. They're invitations to love more intentionally, listen more carefully, and be more present than you've ever been. Your loved one is showing you the roadmap. The question is, will you follow it with courage and compassion? If this video helped you understand what you've been witnessing in your own family, please hit that like button. It helps us reach other families who desperately need this information right now. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you noticed any of these signs in your loved one? What has your experience been? Your story might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear today, so please share it below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.